Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last time I was in conversation on this topic, the Inquiry for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women had just filed their report. This was the very beginning of November. We'd identified that 8 out of the 10 challenges raised by the commissioners of the inquiry, things that were making it difficult for them to get their work done, to get to the root of the terrible problem of murdered and missing Indigenous women, were all government interference, 8 of the 10. When I talked with the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation in question period, she said, we're going to get a quick answer. We're committed to removing barriers. Here we are all these months later and have not yet seen a change. One of the top and most compelling recommendations of the commissioners in their November report were recommending that the government work collaboratively with provinces and territories to create a national police task force to which the national inquiry could refer families and survivors to assess or reopen cases or review investigations. This is extremely important. We've heard repeatedly from families that where police found their report of a missing or murdered family member to be unfounded, something that just had not been investigated and pursued to its very end, that it left families in limbo and with no closure. New Democrats, my colleague from Desenepe, Mississippi, Churchill River, and my New Democrat deputy critic for Indigenous Services, she said, quote, I'm hearing the desire for law enforcement to be involved and given the necessary resources to solve cold cases of missing Indigenous women from all over Saskatchewan, cases like that of my friend Myrna Laprise and her family who want to know what happened to her aunt who disappeared years ago, end quote. The Native Women's Association of Canada also, this is again the summer before last, saying that, again, this is a missed opportunity, that the terms of reference did not specifically invite investigation of cold cases. NWAC said, quote, there does not appear to be an opportunity for families to pursue or reopen cases through the justice system. In fact, for families who want to pursue justice or reopen ones that have been part of the justice system, the terms of reference direct that the support of the commissioners can offer is to redirect them to appropriate provincial or territorial victim services. Families are not looking for mainstream counseling services through victim services, but justice. This is a missed opportunity, end quote. Now, to our disappointment, there still has been no government response to this very pressing recommendation, interim recommendation from the inquiry commissioners, and nothing in the budget released last month to address other vital recommendations from the inquiry. There's no response to any of the requests. In the report, there's no money to establish a commemoration fund in collaboration with family survivors and national and regional Indigenous organizations, as asked. And so my question to the government is, what are you doing with the recommendations? What assurances are you giving to families and survivors that their asks have been heard? And why was there no money in the budget to specifically address the inquiry's appeals for us to resolve the situation once and for all?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Indigenous Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise today in the traditional territory of the Algonquin people to answer the question that have been posed by my honourable colleague. Our government remains committed to ending the ongoing national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. This is why, when previous governments failed to do so, we immediately moved to establish an independent inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. As we have announced and have indicated many times, we have provided nearly $54 million by the federal government over the past 2 years to ensure the success of this national inquiry. The inquiry released its interim report on November the 1st, and the commissioners stated in their interim report that they are striving to make stronger connections with families, with survivors, and women's and Indigenous organizations who are their key partners on the front line. The government will respond shortly to the recommendations of the inquiry's interim report, and we will outline further action at that time. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs has met with these commissioners on several occasions, including since the interim report was released. On the broader recommendations, the Commission is right to raise the important issues because they are all connected. The government took immediate action on these points because they produce better results for communities, they lead to stronger and healthier families, and they support self-determination. A working group has also been created and is meeting regularly with the Commission to help resolve the administrative issues faced by the Commission itself. The working group is providing solutions to ensure the Commission can complete its work. And we are also discussing the Commission's recent request for an extension to the work that they're doing so that they may deal further with families, Indigenous partners, provincial and territorial counterparts. Mr. Speaker, we have said all along, and we continue to say, that families must be at the centre of this independent Commission's work. The families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls remain at the heart of this inquiry. We know that we need to bring healing for the families, justice for the victims, and to put an end to this national tragedy once and for all. We are determined to do this right for the survivors and for their families, to honour the spirits and memories of those who have been lost, and to protect future generations. I thank the member for her question this evening.
Honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
My difficulty with what the member opposite is saying is that nothing has changed to the public since the interim report was released at the beginning of November. We don't see evidence that the Liberals are keeping their promise to help to the families, to help the inquiry succeed at every level. The Prime Minister said he would review the report and pay attention to its recommendations, but nothing has changed. We've had witnesses from the department at committee saying they're preparing options. This is just in January. We're going to have a response very soon. Well, now it's the middle of March and still nothing. We don't have time. So again, through you, Mr. Speaker, to my colleague representing the Minister, when will we hear the government's response to the inquiry's interim recommendations? We need to act quickly.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know the member opposite would like to have this happen within her time frame. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that we are truly committed to real reconciliation with Indigenous people, and the independent national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is vital to that process. We are determined to get this right, and we remain committed to working with Indigenous governments and with communities, provinces and territories and other key partners to end the unacceptable rates of violence against Indigenous women and girls. Yes, we have received the interim report. Yes, the Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs is undertaking that review. She has also met with the independent commissioners, Mr. Speaker, and we will be responding to the interim report. At the end of the day, this is a government that is determined to end the violence that have been perpetrated against Indigenous women and girls in this country, and this is the reason that we have committed to this process and committed nearly $54 million to support this process over the past 2 years.